Well, hello again, and welcome to yet another episode of Sermon B-Sides. My name is Rusten. I'm one of the pastors here at Coram Deo Church, and I'm here with my buddy, my partner in crime, Pastor Jon.
Should we cheers it?
Cheers, yes.
Cheers. So this is water. This really is just water. But this is a very special episode, right?
Episode 52.
52, which means
1 year worth of weekly episodes.
Yeah. Do you remember what month we actually started this in? Was it in August or July?
Well, we officially...
Or was it June?
It was actually April. Okay,
We started in April?
Yes, we started in April, but then we went on a big summer hiatus, right? But our first episode was an Easter 2020 episode.
Wow.
Yeah, on Zoom. Zoom.
Where we spent lots of time talking about whiskey, which we should have at this one, just to kind of commemorate where we've come from.
Yeah, I wish we had thought of that.
Honor our origins.
Yeah, we did get a lot of feedback on those first several episodes. I think we probably had 15 episodes of whiskey beginnings. And some people were like, 15 minutes of just talking about whiskey is a little much.
Now, to be fair, some people really liked it.
Yeah. Well,
and they have a more diversified collection of whiskey in their home as a result now.
Yep.
And also, people found out what whiskeys we liked.
That was really important.
Which was really important come the holidays, because we got some gifts from our church, because they're that kind of a church.
Yes. So if you ever, if you're looking for Christmas present ideas, just go to the first several episodes.
Do not get us this.
But maybe we should just start a whiskey podcast.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't have any bandwidth for extra podcast. Neither do you.
That's true. That's the truth. Okay, so we are currently at this moment have just finished up our series on the Psalms, and so we have 2 episodes of Psalms left to do to kind of catch up with the last 3 sermons. We're condensing 2 of them into one. We have to look at Psalm 42 and 43, and we have to look at Psalm 44. And so we're going to be looking at Psalm 42 and 43. And then I'm super excited we're getting back into Acts.
Oh, boy. Yeah, I started studying yesterday for Acts. I'm like, man, it's going to be fun.
Yeah, it has felt like as we've gone through Acts and Psalms that they've been incredibly timely.
Yes.
The particular kind of conflict you see in Acts and the kind of conflict you see in the Psalms, and it's kind of interesting. It's felt like when you've gone through Acts, it's like the external stuff is on display.
Yep.
The kind of like what happens when God acts, Satan counters, and God, delivers or vindicates, right?
Yep.
And the Psalms have kind of taken the introspective view from Scripture on the same kind of things.
Yeah.
You have in the Psalms a very internalized response to God and calling out to God in the midst of trials, oppression. And it's felt like in particular this summer, like most of the Psalms were very on the God help me, oh my goodness, what's going on?
Yeah.
And it's felt very appropriate.
I made a comment to somebody, I think on Sunday. Actually, I think it was Aaron. It's one of our elders. I was like, I'm so ready to go back to Acts because there's something that's uniquely emotionally draining about preaching to the Psalms.
Yeah. Especially this last batch.
Yes, because there is so much, like you're saying in Acts, you're getting like a report on all the stuff that's happening, and it's incredible. But Psalms is like the inner life. You're seeing the inner workings of people who are suffering and vocalizing their questions and their pain and their frustration. And so every week you're having to not just, as a preacher, you're not just dealing with the pain and frustration of the psalmist, but then you're also trying to connect that with people in your congregation who are going through the same things and the suffering that you're going through, and it's like there's something uniquely exhausting about it. So
and it's like we haven't had any dearth of trials. Like, right. we are currently, we have many people in our church who are at risk of losing their job from forced mandates upon employees.
Yeah.
We have people who are sick. We have people who are dealing with intense, long-term suffering type things.
It's incredible.
And there are deep needs. Like I feel like every week we've had someone email or call us to pray for them in a particular situation.
Yep.
I know that I'm hanging out shortly with some guys that are going to Nashville together for a conference, and both of those guys are concerned about their jobs, and I feel like it's going to be a good time of getting together and probably spend a lot of time praying through that stuff too. And it has been it's been an appropriate time to go through those Psalms, but it's also that's actually made it far more exhausting because like when you go through a Psalm like that and you just don't there's always somebody who's got something they're dealing with, right?
Yeah.
And even if you don't know it.
Yeah.
But when you're going through the Psalm and like half of your congregation is going through this kind of stuff, it just puts a whole nother weight on the words you're preaching.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
So.
Yeah, and there's a pastoral burden that you bear. Like you said, we know. I mean, simultaneously at the very same time, you've got someone who has gone through, I think, their 4th battle with cancer. And is coming out the tail end of that, and things are looking good. And at the very same time, we have somebody who's just got not so great information from their doctor that it looks like there's, and that's happening, and that's in the room as we're gathered together. And so you're preaching to those people, and like you said, people who are, it would not be. We shouldn't be surprised if some of them lose their jobs over these forced mandates. Like that's happening. You've got careers that have been built. People who have worked hard for years and years and years, faithful employees to organizations, and now
means
they
nothing.
could. And it's
nothing.
like so. That's what's in the room. That's what you're. And so there's a. And it's a good thing. It's not a bad thing, but there is an exhaustion to it.
Yeah.
So, and it's part of the irony is that as we're looking at 42 and 43, typically there's a fly around here. It's like this is our Mike Pence moment.
a little 2020.
Which one of us is Kamala though? Then who knows? Well, we won't go there. But we usually are talking about a sermon that one of us has preached. But neither of us preached 42 or 43.
Or 43.
But
I was supposed to preach 43.
Yeah.
And you were supposed to preach 42? No.
I had that one scheduled out. So I was out for a while. But then, so Brandon preached 42.
Yeah.
And you were supposed to preach 43. But you got sick. Yeah. So Brandon preaches 43 as well. And wow.
Yep. So I know we almost went and tagged Brandon to kind of join us.
Brando.
So, but this, one of the themes that we're gonna talk about is this concept of fight or lament. Okay, and we'll get more into that a little later. But this particular Psalm, 42 and 43, all the commentaries say this is probably actually the same.
Yeah,
it's one Psalm that's somehow got a break in it.
Yep.
And if you read it, I mean, it really does seem that way because Psalm 42 feels like it finishes without any resolution.
Yep.
And Psalm 43 kind of feels like it picks up exactly where Psalm 42 left off. And there's even, there's a refrain that happens twice in Psalm 42, and it also happens in Psalm 43. And that refrain it's a very popular refrain. Why are you cast down on my soul? Why are you in turmoil within me? Hope in God, for I shall again praise him, my salvation and my God. And you have that come up twice in 42 and at the end of 43. And so it's a very similar structure. It's almost like verse 1 and 2 with the chorus after each one comes up in Psalm 42, and then verse 3 and the last final iteration of the chorus comes up in 43.
Yep.
But one of the things that's really emphasized throughout both of these as a unifying whole is that the psalmist is in the midst of intense trial.
Yeah. Yep.
And he's thirsting and longing for God. He says, my tears have been my food day and night. And then he's also under external oppression. He says that there's this voices that keep coming up and taunting him, saying, where is your God? That happens actually, I think, 2 or 3 times in the psalm where the question is asked, where is your God? They say to me all the day long, where is your God? And in the midst of that,
which is just an echo of the cross.
It is, yes.
Right? Like,
yes.
you see the son suffering. Where is your God?
Exactly. And what this psalm really does is it teaches us to fight those kinds of oppressions, those kinds of internal turmoil. And I remember Martin Lloyd-Jones has a book called Spiritual Depression. I think he spends an entire chapter just talking about this psalm and how this psalm teaches us to talk to ourselves. Like in the midst of, because the psalm is saying, why are you cast down, O my soul? Why are you in turmoil within me? Hope in God. I shall again praise him, my salvation and my God. And so in the midst of these trials, in the midst of these people taunting him, there is a lot that this psalmist is teaching us and putting in our hands, as it were, weapons to fight both the taunts and the hopelessness and the depression that would go, internal turmoil that would go along with it. And I thought it'd be interesting just to talk about what those weapons are, the things that come up.
Before we talk about the weapons, we just back up just a little bit.
Yeah.
And I said this on Sunday, one of the things that the Psalms do is they teach us what to expect, right? And so I think it's important to acknowledge that there is a pervasive theme through the Psalms of suffering, where he says, my soul is cast down within me, right? And there are certain kind of strands of Christianity that would say there's something wrong with you if you're experiencing this, right? You should be living the victorious life, and so one of the correctives, the sobering correctives that the Psalms give us is like, if you're following God, if you trust in Him, you should not expect that everything is going to be always great and perfect. You should expect difficult times. You should expect what Lloyd-Jones like spiritual depression. You should expect these questions, these times where, in verse 1, a deer, as a deer pants for flowing streams, so my soul is panting for you, oh God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God, right? And so there's this desire, but what becomes very clear in the next verse is it's an unmet desire. Like he's longing for God, but his soul is downcast, like where have you gone? So I think just acknowledging, because people get in those seasons and then they think I did something wrong or something's wrong with me, or you feel like you're completely alone. I'm the only person who's ever gone through this, and the Psalms are a great, not just guide, but a comfort.
Yeah, comfort by the realism.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
And yet there's a realism, and yet there's also a hope that many might feel is like wishful thinking, right? In the midst of, so there's like this combination of like, they're realistic. They tell you to expect trial, expect turmoil, but they also tell you that there's something we're called to do. They don't always tell us what the outcome's going to be. Right. Like we're going to get into that with Psalm 44. Yeah. But they tell us, and especially this one tells us what to do with that turmoil. Yeah. Right, and there's a this is a battle psalm. It feels like a fight. Yeah. But it's an internal fight. Yeah. And it's a fight in the midst of taunts. Like, what do you do when someone is taunting you? And and later in Psalm 43, it says, "Vindicate me, O God, defend my cause against an ungodly people, from the deceitful and unjust man, deliver me." So, not only is he being, "Where's your God?" He's being lied about. Yeah. He's being unjust things are being taken against him, right? And the answer that he knows, it's like this conflict. 'Cause he knows the answer. The answer is run to God, cling to God. Yeah. But it doesn't remove the battle and the fight and the turmoil and the struggling. Right. There's
still there.
And there's a kind of like there's a really glib way to say like there's a really glib way people have about like approaching life sometimes as Christians, and it's that let go and let God. Yeah. Right? Jesus take the wheel kind of thing. Yeah. And it's like said with this saccharine candy like tone of like, just if you just let God, everything will be great. Right. And it's like actually the psalmist is demonstrating here that there is a lot of wrestle that happens. Yeah. There's a lot of conflict that comes, and what do you hunger and thirst, and that it has to be directed because you're prone to being downcast and losing your hope. And so he fights by telling himself, why are you downcast? Put your hope in God.
Yeah.
If your hope is in your public display and people thinking you're great rather than lying about you and saying, where's your God?
Right.
If your hope is in those things, then you're going to be downcast.
Right.
Right. And so he's in the midst of those things. Those things are still bad, but he knows that he can't let those things be the cause of his utter depression and sadness, because his ultimate satisfaction and hope is in God. And one of the things that comes up a lot in this couplet of Psalms is the emphasis on being with God's people. Like he says,
and this is how you fight.
Yeah, how you fight.
Right?
He's like, my tears have been my food day and night, while they say to me all the day long, where's your God? These things I remember as I pour out my soul, how I would go with the throng and lead them in procession to the house of God with glad shouts and songs of praise, a multitude keeping festival. And that same theme comes up again in 43. Send out your light and your truth. Let them lead me. Let them bring me to your holy hill and to your dwelling, that I will go to the altar of God, to God my exceeding joy, and I will praise you with the lyre, O God, my God. It's very consistent with the theme that we've covered in previous episodes of worship being warfare. But I feel like this last year and a half, some of these things that we've kind of taken at, face value, just like over years of being Christian and living in the church, this has become real in a new way, right? In the midst of the craziness of 2020, 2021. This has become evident in a new way. And could you kind of share some of your own experiences of some of that over the last year, or maybe even recently?
Well, so when you say like worship is warfare, right? Just to redirect that a little bit, I think when you hear worship is warfare, you think worship is warfare against the world, and there's an element in which that's true. But the warfare that's happening, I think, in these is a warfare against my flesh.
Exactly. Yes.
Right? How do I declare war against my own unbelief and my own despair, anxiety, and my own all those fears, right? Well, worship is that's how you do it. It's not just declaring war against what's
the
wrong
principalities
out there.
And powers.
Yeah, but that's true for sure. But there's also it's how we're declaring war against my own despair. My own depression, my own, whatever it is, my own flesh. So just to clarify, like an inward warfare. So, okay, your question was what?
Just like, what are some ways that's come up in the last year, or maybe even more recently? We've had some kind of, where being with the people of God, praising God, has reoriented ourselves to be able to say honestly, why have you been downcast, my soul? Look at the hope in God.
Well, we can back it up, and I think we've talked about this in other episodes, but it's so curious as we go back to the beginning of 2020, and here's this virus coming, and the measures that were taken by our governor were measures that make things worse, particularly. Don't be with each other. And going into not just the initial lockdowns, but also with mandates against churches gathering, and thank God that MacArthur has been vindicated in their church. There's a certain sense of poetic justice there. But even going to the holidays, like don't gather with friends. Like don't. I remember seeing this meme. It's better to have a Zoom Thanksgiving than a ER Christmas. And it was like, so we went through the ringer with all of that, and I think our elders decided for a short season that we were gonna not meet for a couple of weeks, and then when we started to meet together, that gathering was so sweet, and just became increasingly sweet. And you realize that isolation has a way of taking things that are real and dark and accentuating them and making them, it multiplies it, you know? So there was a sweetness of getting together. We talked about when we did the drive-up service, and I think Pastor Ryan talked about like weeping, seeing people, you know, in their cars. And so we, I think, have had a renewed understanding and appreciation of this, the sweetness. And there's a depth to it because there's certain strands, right? There's certain churches and movements that what they value about the gathering is the production. Right? It's the screens, it's the quality of the music, it's the, you know, and what we experienced was like, none of that matters. The sweetness of the gathering is getting to see the face of a brother or a sister. You know, like I specifically, there's people in our church that we mentioned earlier who have been going through like battling with cancer. And to see the joy on their face when they come take communion on Sunday, you know what that does?
Feeds all of us.
It feeds, and like my soul is enriched because I'm like, here is this person that I know is walking through the valley of the shadow of death. And they have joy. And they are unshakable. And I'm serving them communion, you know, and it's so humbling. So there's been experiences like that where it's like, it is so good and enriching to get together. But more recently, this last Sunday night, you and I and a bunch of other people got together for a party that a friend of ours, a member at our church, throws every single year and just invites people to come out. And you know, it's great food and there's great drink and people bring, you know, all sorts of stuff to share. And there was this moment where there was a circle of mostly men sitting, smoking our pipes. Something happened in the last year because typically there's a bunch of cigars that we enjoy there. And this year is like, there was like one or two cigars, but it was all pipes. So
I might have something to do with that.
Did you? Okay.
Me and Russ and Ross have all got on the pipe wagon at the same time.
I mean, there was like a ton of pipes. And so I recently had gotten a new pipe because I'm like, I really enjoy smoking. I don't, cigarettes are really not good for me, and I really like smoking cigarettes. A cigar is a long-term investment in terms of money, and a good cigar is at least $10.
And it's also a commitment in terms of time.
Yeah, it's like I don't have an hour. So anyway, so there's this circle, and we're all smoking pipes, and there was a guy in our church who is a really good home brewer. Like he's like should probably open his own. So he's brought his drinks, and he brought a bottle of Ardbeg. Did you?
Yeah, I did. See that,
he's like, it's not really my thing. And he goes, you can just have it. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So we're all, you know, we're enjoying drinks and we're smoking. And so a buddy leans over and he says, this is such a nice break from the real world. And I kind of sat there and I was like, you know what? This is the real world.
Exactly.
This right here, God's people gathered together. What are we doing? We're feasting, right? We're celebrating, and it was getting dark, and there were you know strings of lights up, and like and people were laughing, and you know I was like, this is a glimpse of the kingdom. This is what the kingdom smells like. This is what it tastes like, and it's like just for this moment, it was like sanity, and life, and you had
and it wasn't like those guys in that circle didn't have heavy problems.
No, a couple of them. Are facing dismissal from their jobs.
And they're in the middle of dealing with that crisis, and for them, it was life. It was like life-giving and you know, orienting around what's true, what's good, what's right. And it's just like Psalm 43 and 42 and 43.
Yeah, that gathering, that's perfect. That gathering wasn't great because everybody there had no issues.
Exactly. There are lots of issues.
Lots of issues. But everybody's there to celebrate. And what that does is it gives context to those issues. Right?
Yes.
And one of the things that I've heard, and I'm sure you have heard, is like the people who are going through these things that are really, really difficult, they're they're giving thanks to God for it, and they're saying, we're so thankful for our church that supports us. We know we're not alone.
Yep. And I'm seeing the guy, we could have gone every other person, and it would have been one person who's going through the ringer, and the other person I can remember being in conversation saying, dude, I'm here for you.
Yeah.
I want to stand with you with whatever happens, and we can figure this out together. The real acts to bearing one another's burdens kind of stuff happening.
Absolutely.
And it's interesting because, you mentioned how these two Psalms are teaching us how to war against our flesh. And when you were talking about the season of weeks being like shut down in the very beginning, I can tell you honestly, that was a very difficult time for me and my flesh. Okay. And I don't mean it nothing egregious or whatever, but just I remember just being so, when you're disconnected from people, you're just so self-focused.
Yeah.
And I remember just being I can remember waking up 3-4 weeks into it and being I just don't know what's going on with anybody. And it felt like all that I cared about and was spending time on was myself, my projects, what I was doing, and some of it was also you also are maybe somewhat consumed with the anxiety of the moment in the world, right? But it was it was the worst possible thing for that kind of time.
Yeah.
And it also cut me off from understanding other people's darkness they were going through.
Yeah.
I can remember, 6 or 7 weeks in, getting an email and being people who have been struggling hardcore through this and being feeling like I'm blindsided. And I was I wasn't blindsided because I couldn't have assumed that was going on. I was blindsided because I wasn't in community with these people.
Yeah.
I wasn't. So when you are with people, people are a really healthy dose against your flesh.
Yeah.
Their needs, their problems are what help you kill your selfishness.
Yeah.
Right. And so that week of time was very or those weeks I can remember just feeling I can't really remember much of those weeks because they were so self-focused.
Yeah.
And then as soon as we got out of them and started seeing what was going on in people's lives and connecting with people, and it's you have people to give to and to help and needs and people dealing with tough times and stuff because just by the nature of being with people.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting how there's a whole element of the flesh being fought, but what it looks like when it's being fought is like that description of Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
It's these people gathered together, enjoying one another.
Right.
Not enjoying their own projects, what they're doing just for themselves.
Yes.
Although it's I'm not saying what you do with your hands and the simple life you live at home isn't something you should take joy in. But I'm when there's an emphasis on that to the exclusion of what's going on with my brother and my sister, what's going on with them in their life, and then being with them in the midst of it, then there's something's wrong.
Yeah, and you're bearing one another's burdens,
but
you're also sharing each other's joy.
Exactly.
There's something that happens when the one brother is I don't know what's going to happen with my job. And the brother sitting right next to him was dude, we're going to figure this out. We're going to start businesses.
Yeah.
We're going to whatever. And you that right there, that's a beautiful thing. That's part of what was happening in Acts chapter 2. Yeah. But that doesn't happen when those guys are separated.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And the beautiful thing is that what brings those two guys together is not affinity. What brings those two guys together is the gospel.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
They didn't know each other a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally.
But it was their union in Christ.
Yep.
And then that's spilling over into these beautiful expressions. So that's how you declare war.
Yeah.
And so we talked about lamenting and fighting.
Yeah.
And understanding that both of those are appropriate, but confusing them.
The time that you would
timing can be really. I mean, do you want to speak into that? Is that for the next episode?
I think we should talk about it now.
Okay.
And then it will come up again in the next episode.
Okay. So why don't you dive into that a little bit?
Lament is this, this thing that we do where we cry out to God, "Oh God, why? Help!" And we're taught to do that, right? And then, but we're also taught to fight, to take action. And there can be appropriate times for both of those.
Mm-hmm.
A lament that's mostly passive and saying, I don't know what to do, cry out, right?
Yeah.
Versus a, God, I know what to, like, for instance, this psalm is a lament that also knows what to do.
Yeah.
I know I need to have my hope in God.
Yeah.
I know I need to go to the procession.
Yep.
I need to see his people, right?
Yeah.
Send out your light and your truth, God. Like those are the things happening in this psalm. And then there's times where it's just like something hits you so hard and you have nothing to say but why, God?
Yeah.
And I'd say that's lament versus fight.
Yeah.
And certain fights can have forms of lament in them, right?
Yeah.
But there's a kind of what I've seen happen, especially in the last year and a half, is that what I think is a confusing of the appropriateness of when to lament versus when to fight.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, there was an article, I don't know, a year and a half. It's like now it's like a year and a half. It's so weird to think it's a year and a half ago.
Oh,
but like from N.T. Wright that emphasized lament and how there's nothing to do with coronavirus coming.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing to do but just lament, like, why, God, why? And I think that seeds too much when we're actually given things to do in the midst of trials.
Yeah.
We're given things, we should gather in the midst of trials.
Yeah.
We should gather in the midst of these things. So you gave a really great example earlier.
Yeah.
Right? So when your son has died.
In a car accident.
That's time to lament. It's time to just cry out, bring all your burdens and your tears to God and say, why?
Yeah.
God, I don't know why, but I trust you, but this is terrible. Why have you done this?
Mm-hmm.
Like, just lament, like, and knowing that you may not get an answer, right? But that God's the one you go to with that grief.
Yeah.
Versus your son is in a car accident, the car's on fire. That's not the time to say, God, why?
Yeah.
Why have you done this?
Yeah.
Why I'm grieved in my heart. No, the time if your kid is in there and he's alive still,
yeah,
it's time to go get your hands dirty,
go fight,
right? And I think that N.T. Wright's article was like applying lament to your kids in the car dying.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot of times this last year and a half where we have done that, where we have applied lament to a situation when we were supposed to ask the scriptures and ask God's word, what are we supposed to do when all of these things are happening? What are we supposed to do when this is happening, right? And there's
what does that look like? You're saying we should have been fighting, we lamented. What did that look like?
I think in some regards it has looked like a continual absence from worship. When there are good reasons to say you should still be there. Like there are certain situations that are unique, right? But when you're not in one of those unique situations, like, and you're just lamenting rather than joining the chorus of God's people worshiping Him, that would be a situation where I think something like that would happen. When I could think of like political situations where something terrible, like some terrible policy has gone into place, and all you're doing is lamenting when you could actually take action.
Yeah.
You could actually use the means God has given you to speak politically into these things, right? I think that, and you do that as a Christian. You do that as, this is not just,
Right.
There's lots of things that have, there's a lot of folks who have assigned the abortion category to just the lament category.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just so sad. God, please, why have you done this? When there's actually lots of things to do to address it. And it's like, wow, we've had some examples this last month of this heartbeat bill going on in Texas.
Yeah.
And there are people freaking out about that.
Yeah.
And it's like the person who just resigns themselves to lament would never think creatively about how to do something like that.
How to do it. Yep. Yeah.
So I think that we should think more deeply about that, because I think that sometimes we're being trained by people like N.T. Wright to just take the lament course of action when God is actually calling us to action, right?
Fight.
To fight. Like if you know, it kind of reminds me of David and losing his son with Bathsheba, right? Like God tells him he's going to lose his son, and what does he do? Well, he fights. He fasts and prays and fasts and prays until his son is taken away, and then it's like, all right, like there's nothing more to do.
Right.
You know, there's a difference in based on what is in front of you.
Yeah.
So, cool.
So this is a call to fight.
I think it's a call to fight. Yes. Yeah. I think we're in the midst right now. I think of the largest call to fight we have seen in our generation.
Yeah.
And I think that God has been gracious and kind to us to maybe wake some of us up to how much we can't just assume certain things that we thought we could assume.
Yeah.
And I think that I just end on this. Like, one of the things that I love about this couple of Psalms is that line that says, "Send out your light and your truth, let them lead me." Right? I feel like we need a Josiah moment of like, the world has been just running hard away from God, and the church needs to stand up and say, "Hey, we found God's law in the temple. We found His word.
Bring out the word.
This is like, stand upon it, speak firmly about it." You know, the priests who found it and read it to Josiah, and Josiah just wept and then started all the reforms in Israel.
Yeah.
And I think that the church plays that role of a civilization of saying, "Hey, everybody, we found the word."
Yeah.
And likewise, God, send out your light and your truth.
Yeah.
You know, convict the leaders about what's right and just.
Yep.
Take leaders out that are not following your word. I think that we maybe have long been in a Josiah moment, needing a Josiah moment.
Needing it, yeah.
I think that the point of like clarity of how much we need it is for sure happening right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's not, like we've said this, it's not going away.
No.
In fact, it may be getting worse here pretty soon.
Yeah. And it's really sad to see a lot of our Christian institutions seem like they're going the opposite direction, which I think you have a podcast on that coming up soon.
Probably.
All right. Well, until next time, we hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Sermon B-Sides looking at Psalm 42 and 43. Until next time, man, I always forget. I forgot it, man.
Just trust Christ.
Trust Christ.
Love your neighbor. Go to church.
Yes, trust Christ. Love your neighbor. Go to church. See you guys.
See ya.
Bye.